Xander de Rijken.
My advice to you is seek professional help.
Hallo iedereen en welkom bij Ben je nog aan het kijken? De podcast waar ik, uw host Xander de Rijken, iedere week praat met gasten over hun favoriete televisieprogramma. Deze week weer een special guest. Nadat ik vorig seizoen de goede respons had opgemerkt na de afleveringen over animatiereeksen zoals The Simpsons en Family Guy, heb ik contact gezocht met iemand die een beetje meer kon vertellen achter het maakproces van een populaire animatiereeks. Het resultaat daarvan is deze aflevering.
Ben je nog aan het kijken?
Mijn gast vandaag is een Amerikaanse schrijver, producer en een van de showrunners van de animatiereeks Family Guy. Daarnaast schreef hij ook mee aan The Cleveland Show en de films Ted, Ted 2, A Million Ways to Die in the West en produceerde hij ook de Fox-sitcom Dads. Een plezier om mee te praten en een belachelijk sympathiek man, de stem van Jezus hemzelf, Alec Sulkin.
Ben je nog aan het kijken?
I'm going to start with asking you, because it's a podcast about television, what are the shows you grew up on and the ones that inspired your writing for television?
Well, okay. So that's a good question. Well, I grew up on a lot of different shows. Some of them were inspiring, others were not. Like, for example, I loved as a kid watching the Brady Bunch, which is fun when you're a kid, but it's in no way inspiring to write. You know, it's not very well written. It's just more about like looking at other kids who are a little older than you and thinking, oh my God, isn't it cool? And I'm going to grow up soon and all that. But something that definitely did inspire me that I watched a lot as a kid was Bugs Bunny, Looney Tunes. You know, I every Saturday morning I would watch, they would have like a 2-hour block in the morning of Looney Tunes, and I was just totally into that. And then, of course, a little bit later, you know, when I was about 15 or 16, The Simpsons came out, and that was obviously like, you know, being hit by a thunderbolt. It was so great. It just right away recognizing that this was awesome and I loved it. I couldn't get enough of it. I used to tape it on on VHS and watch them over and over again. So those were definitely some shows in terms of writing for animation. Looney Tunes and The Simpsons are the two biggest by far.
Yeah, what I always loved about Looney Tunes is that every character had a set of rules behind it. Like the Roadrunner had this amazing list of stuff he can and can't do, which relied on gravity and if he can make a jump. Is that something in Family Guy that's also present? Like, are there a set of rules within the characters of Family Guy?
I mean, they're not hard and fast rules. I would say there are general rules, but we often break them.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes it makes things funnier when you break the rules of your own character, because Peter obviously is a pretty stupid guy, but every once in a while we'll make him extra smart for a joke. And it's funny because all of a sudden this guy's talking about stuff that he shouldn't know about. So yeah. And I mean, with characters like Quagmire, who was basically most of the time just like a, almost like Pepe Le Pew, just chasing women around all the time. It's kind of fun to add different shades to his character. Like he's very competitive when it comes to playing sports. Like he's a stickler for the rules. He's kind of like a neighborhood association kind of dickhead. And so it's fun to watch him get really entrenched in those things, in addition to, being just a general kind of womanizer.
I always loved that you made him hate Brian. For really no reason at all.
Yes. And that's, I give all credit to Seth for that, because I think Brian is the character in the show that's closest to Seth, like to who Seth is. Brian is, it's basically Seth's regular voice.
Yeah.
And
loves
Brian, right. And Brian espouses a lot of the beliefs that Seth has, liberal, progressive. But then Seth, I think, also recognizes in himself that a lot of liberals and progressives are just kind of full of shit. And they just they like to hear themselves talk. And, they know that what they say will sound good, but Quagmire just does not buy it. Like he hears Brian speak and it's like nails on a chalkboard. So I think that's funny.
I read after you majored English in college, you interned at SNL for a couple of years and you did stand-up for a while. Could you expand on that period of your life? Because I'm a stand-up myself and it piqued my interest.
Sure. Okay, so basically when I was still in college, when I was a senior in college, I was able to get an internship at SNL. And so I went to a college that was about 2 hours by train from New York City. So I just engineered my classes in my senior year so that my last class ended on Wednesday. And then I would take the train down to New York and I would work at SNL on Thursday and Friday and obviously Saturday for the show day and come back on Sunday. And that was obviously, especially for, a 20, 21-year-old kid, that was incredibly exciting because that's another show that I grew up watching all the time, loving. And then to be there in the middle of it in New York City was just fantastic. And so I was lucky enough the year after college they offered me a job as writer's assistant. That was something that I was thrilled about. I could move to New York. I was getting paid, not a lot, but it was enough to live on. And back then, today, a writer's assistant's job is a little bit different than it was back then. Today, writer's assistants are, they are at the computer and they transcribe every word everyone says, and you have every note, and you're sending out notes. It was not like that at SNL. Basically, I was just a guy who was in charge of getting everybody's lunch. Like that. It wasn't me taking notes. They did all that for themselves because this was the mid 90s. So yes, there were computers, but the internet wasn't really a big thing yet. And everybody was kind of doing their own notes, typing their own scripts and all that. So that was a fantastic time. Then just unceremoniously, I was fired like that. And I was devastated because I really wanted to become a writer there. And I knew I could do it. I wanted to do it very badly. But I just, for the most bullshit of circumstances, was fired. I was replaced. I don't know if you know who Regis Philbin is. I don't know.
I do, yeah.
Yeah. So he was a big talk show host. He actually died this past year, but he basically was kind of Mr. New York morning, whereas SNL was like New York late night.
Yeah.
So one day on Regis Philbin's show, he brings his young daughter on and has her turn to camera and say, like, tell Lorne Michaels, what do you want to tell him? And she was like, I'd love to, Lauren, get me a job. So they fired me and gave her the job. It was just like devastating. It took me, obviously, I'm still not over it, like 25 years later. And so then I only tell that because that was the reason that I started doing stand-up. Like I wasn't doing stand-up when I was at SNL. I was like, screw that. I don't need to do that. I'm going to be a writer here. Like, what do I care? But then when that kind of was taken away, I felt like, all right, well, I'm here in New York. There are, hundreds of stand-up clubs. The day I got fired, I was like, I'm going to give myself 3 weeks and then I'm going to start doing stand-up. So for 3 weeks, I was writing and trying out, testing bits in the mirror, basically. And so this was 1996. I got up on stage and then I did stand up for 3 years in New York until I got a writing job in LA. And then I was like, goodbye, stand up, never want to see you again. So I was very happy to put it in my rearview mirror. But while I was doing it, it was a nightmare. It was fun. It was funny. It was terrifying. It was all that,
Well, it still is. It's good to hear. It was the same in the 90s than now.
Yeah. And it was like a friend of mine jokes, and he started at the same time, that the minute the guy got off stage before we started, that's when the stand-up boom ended. Like it was like everyone in stand-up was getting TV deals and money and specials, and then all of a sudden we started and it was like crickets.
Was the LA job the Craig Kilborn show then?
That's correct.
And you wrote there, was it I never saw the Craig Kilborn show. I'm more a Craig Ferguson generation.
Sure.
Was it monologue, desk pieces, sketches? What did you write there?
Yeah, it was kind of all that stuff. So it was monologue, desk pieces, sketches. He used to do this thing called 5 questions where he would ask his first guest, 5 funny questions. So there were different little things to write for every day. And that was a fantastic job. It was, I was obviously glad to have it because I was doing stand up for nothing. And then for somebody to say, well, we'll pay you and you can move out to LA. That's great. But there was a lot of, because there were so many different facets of the show, like monologue and desk pieces and sketches and all that, you really had to work different parts of your comedy brain to do things every day, every week, every month. But it was so much fun. Like I really enjoyed it there. And Craig Kilborn is like such a funny guy. I still talk to him all the time.
And what led to Family Guy? Is it that came after that? Did you start in the first season of Family Guy, or when it got canceled and picked up and canceled again and picked up again?
So I basically came to Family Guy at the best possible time because they had been canceled twice, and then they were brought back, and that's when I came. So I came. It was like and so then there was. It seemed definite that like, okay, we're not going to cancel this again. So I came in 2004 and I worked on Craig Kilborn from 99 to 02. And then from 02 to 04, I was working on a couple of different sitcoms that like didn't really go, they didn't make it. But I met so many great writers in those sitcom rooms, even though the shows didn't go anywhere. And one of the people that I met in those rooms was Seth MacFarlane, because he was, Family Guy had been canceled. And so he had to go work on other shows. And so I met him on a show where we happened to work together, and we're basically the same age. So we became fast friends, and he told me, he said, hey, they're talking about bringing Family Guy back. And if they do, I'd like you to come write for it. And of course, I was thinking in my mind, there's no way they're going to bring that show back. Like it's already been canceled twice. Like you're delusional. And then, of course, the rest is history. They brought it back, and I've been there pretty much ever since.
Could you take me through the writing process of a Family Guy episode?
Sure. So basically, at the beginning of every season, we have a ton of writers. So, so we have like 20 writers on the show now. And at the beginning of every season, the writers come in with a handful of story ideas. So, between everyone, you're looking at close to 100 ideas at the beginning of every season. So then we kind of like filter out the ones that are obviously not going to work. And then we try and get like the best ones that we think are possibly a story. And then there'll be rooms of like 5 or 6 people that will say, hey, we want to do this Peter story where he becomes a male nurse, and can you 5 talk about it for a day, a couple days, see if it gets any traction. So that room will talk about it. They will put together an outline, the 3 acts, act 1, act 2, act 3. Where does the story go in act 2? How does it end in act 3? And then we'll look at this outline. A couple of the people who are the showrunners will look at it and say, okay, this looks good. And we'll pick a writer. It isn't necessarily the writer who came up with the idea originally, but it can be. And it more often than not, it is. We'll tell that writer, okay, go off and write this outline. This thing that we see on a board in front of us, go write an outline, which is usually about a 10 to 12 page document with each scene, kind of with a little paragraph for each scene saying what's going to happen in this scene, this scene, this scene. Then the outline comes back. We read it. We give notes on the outline, say, well, change this part. I think this scene and this scene should swap places. And then we have this is a good thing that is kind of unique to Family Guy. where after the outline, we'll have another couple of days with a room with 5 or 6 people called a gag pass, where these 5 or 6 writers and the writer of the episode, the future writer of the episode, will go through scene by scene, and they'll pitch jokes for each scene. So when the writer is going off to write his draft, he's already equipped with hopefully like a dozen possible jokes in every scene.
That was going to be my follow-up question. Yeah. Like who writes the story or who writes the jokes? But it seems everyone does a little bit of everything.
Everyone does. Yeah. Everyone does. Yeah. Everyone pitches in on all facets, on every phase of the script. Everyone's pretty much helping. But the one time when the writer is kind of alone is after this gag pass on the outline. Then the individual writer of the episode will go off, leave the office for 2 weeks. So that's a long time in the Hollywood world. Most people get only 1 week, but we have so many writers, we can give them 2 weeks. They write the first draft, and that's usually about 50 pages. It comes back. We look at it in the room. We go over it. We cut things. We punch it up. We, add jokes. We change things. Then we have a table read where, as it sounds, we read it out for, the rest of the writers and the production staff. And sometimes we have some of the voice actors there. And based on how that table read goes, we'll rewrite it again, usually that very day, the day of the table read, because it's fresh in our minds. We rewrite it again, and it gets sent into the production phase where the animators start to work on it, and they come up with storyboards, which are on pieces of paper, frame by, kind of like scene by scene, frame by frame of what they think it's going to look like. They turn those storyboards into something called an animatic, which is like a black and white kind of pencil drawing version of the show. And then we watch the animatic, which is usually a couple months later. And we'll see, okay, this joke was good on paper, but it didn't work visually. So we cut it out, we change it, we make it better, hopefully. Then after that rewrite, it gets sent off to Korea. And that's where they do the color version. So everything gets colored in Korea. Many months later, it comes back. We watch it one more time when it's in color, change any little things that we want to, and then the next time we see it, it's on TV.
So what is the timing between start of an episode, just pitching an episode and airing it? Well, like
it's
half a year.
Oh no, it can be a year and a half.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because the part in Korea takes the longest, because what I didn't explain, because it's a little boring, is the animatic version of the show, which is black and white and rough, is 1 out of every 20 frames of animation they draw here. So in Korea, they got to fill in the other 19, so it's like an animatic can look a little choppy, the movements, because it's not quite filled in. So in Korea, not only are they adding the color, but they're adding the 19 missing frames, in every moment. But it takes a long time. It takes a long time to get them ready.
Actually, when we're watching a season, there's about a year and a half. You guys are a year and a half ahead while writing when the season.
Correct.
Amazing.
Yeah, it is. It's kind of a weird thing.
What I always loved about Family Guy was the pop culture references. Something it was heavy with, I think, from the first season, because my first memory of Family Guy when it aired in Belgium, I think the late 90s, like the first season, was a TV spot, I think, for the episode, the Y2K episode, where some guys in hazmat suits enter the house, and Chris yells, "The government's here, run E.T." And E.T. runs out of a closet.
Yeah.
And I had never seen that in a show ever.
Right.
I didn't know you could do that, by the way. Just enter a character from Universal in a cartoon. Is that something you strive for with each episode, trying to make these fun little pop culture references?
I think we do try. And of course, it gets more and more challenging as we all get older. Most of the writers there are over 40, and many of them are over 50. And so
a lot of 80s references.
Yeah, so we're stuck in the 80s. And, if we do references in the 90s, we feel like we're hip and modern. So, we really have to kind of like help ourselves and update ourselves, in terms of like pop culture references and stuff that's going on at the time. But I think, we definitely still try to do that stuff. We still try to, make references about things that are happening now, or at least, a year and a half ago when we wrote the script. But yeah, we do try to put that kind of stuff in. But I think now, obviously we're writing season 20 now. And I think that we just want to make sure that the jokes are funny and the story's decent.
Yeah.
And then if there are pop culture references in it, even better. If there aren't, that's okay.
Yeah, but because I was thinking, like, how do you decide on a gag with a celebrity cameo? For example, like, is it a joke you just write and we'll see if we can get him or her, or do you write a joke around someone? Like,
yeah, that's an interesting question. I think we just write the joke, and then, like we have a few jokes in the upcoming seasons about Mario Lopez. You remember him from Saved by the Bell, yeah. And he's now like a host of some entertainment show, and he's kind of on TV all the time here. And we made a joke about Mario Lopez, and it wasn't really a slam. It was just kind of that S2E is very into Mario Lopez, like clearly because he thinks he's hot, and kind of play S2E is sort of like gay, in case you hadn't noticed. So we did a joke about Mario Lopez, and the next day Mario Lopez tweeted like, "Oh my God, so awesome to be on Family Guy. Glad Stewie's a fan." And I thought to myself, wow, we actually have a couple more Mario Lopez jokes coming out where it requires his voice. The first one didn't. And so then I thought, like, yeah, we can now get him. Like, he's a little invested in this.
Yeah.
Obviously, it depends on what the joke we're doing is. If we're going to slam somebody, they're not going to, come and do their voice. But, sometimes we had a situation where there was an episode maybe 10 or more years ago, dozen years ago maybe, where we had Peter writing a letter to Carrie Elways, the actor from The Princess Bride.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so one of the things in the letter, he said, "Dear Carrie Elways, are you famous anymore?" Like that was the thing. It was part of the letter. And so then the show aired, and within a couple of weeks, Carrie Elways just came to the office, and he came into the writer's room. And of course, it's Carrie Elways, this handsome, Prince Charming from Princess Bride. He came in, and he had written his own reply letter to Peter, and he read it to us, like about whether or not he was famous. And like, so we were so charmed by that, of course, that we've used him for probably half a dozen voices since then. Like not even as himself. Like we've written characters into the show where he just plays like we had a show recently where Brian finds his old family, like he was abandoned by a family, and we had him play the father of the family, and he had a lot of, so sometimes we can get celebrity interactions that way, which is really cool.
Yeah, what I loved, and also in the live action movies like that and A Million Ways to Die in the West, is you're really good at not overusing a cameo. Like the Ryan Reynolds cameos, they just sit there. He doesn't have any lines. It's just a cutaway. I absolutely adore the Doc Brown joke in A Million Ways to Die. A shame they spoiled it a little bit in the trailers.
I know.
But it's a great joke.
Totally.
One of my favorite jokes in a movie.
Yeah, that was awesome. I mean, because we all just worship Back to the Future, and in particular him in it. And so that was awesome when he was willing to do that, and just seeing him in that costume on our set was so cool. And we also, it's funny, there's Ewan McGregor has a very small cameo.
Yeah, right.
A Million Ways to Die in the West. And actually, like, I happened to be in the movie for like 1 second, one scene, and I'm standing right next to him. So I was very excited about that.
I forgot. I rewatched all the movies for this interview. I forgot.
Yeah, well, and also he doesn't look like himself. Like, I mean, I know because we picture him as Obi-Wan, with the beard or maybe from Train Spotting with a shaved head. But in this, he looked like he had a mustache and Western gear and looked very kind of different. So not too many people spotted him. But I was happy. But I was happy to stand next to him all day.
Speaking of genre movies, I wanted to talk about the Blue Harvest episode. How did that come to be? When did you decide to go, fuck it, let's do Star Wars?
Yeah, well, that again, I have to give credit to Seth on that. That at the time, it was I had come onto the staff a couple years earlier, and Seth is a huge Star Wars fan. I'm also a huge Star Wars fan. So we, in the writers' room, there would often be times where we'd be speaking that Star Wars language and kind of, so often, and we kept putting in little Star Wars jokes in the show. There'd be, this bit or that bit. And so I remember vividly, Seth and I were out at karaoke one night. And then we went outside, I think, to like smoke a cigarette or something. And he was like, we keep doing these Star Wars references in the show. He's like, we should just do a Star Wars episode. And he was like, and if we do, I want you to write it. And I was like, of course. I was thrilled to do that. So we got to work on it right away. And originally it was supposed to be a half an hour. And clearly when I was writing it, I kept saying to the showrunner, this guy, David Goodman at the time, I was like, this has got to be an hour. And he has a funny voice and he kept being like, it's a half hour. Just keep it short. Stop. Don't overwrite it. It's a half hour. And so then when we gave the script to Seth and he read it, he was like, this is an hour-long episode. And Dave was like, exactly, an hour. That's what I've been telling him.
Yeah, it's a great episode. I love what you did there.
Oh, well, I mean, of course, as you just heard, the entire staff helps out immensely, added many, many funny jokes, including my favorite joke of the episode was added by this writer, Mark Henteman. It was that whole joke with the couch getting stuck in the in that garbage compactor. Like, that was so funny to me.
And they take off with the couch, like
yes, sticking out of the Millennium Falcon.
That's the dumbest thing ever. I know you've had this question before, but I'm gonna ask it again. A Family Guy movie, because there was the Stewie finds his real father kind of arc.
Yeah, the untold
story. Yeah. Is there still an idea to do like a Family Guy movie?
I mean, I think it's going to happen. I can't say with 100% certainty, but I have had discussions with Seth about it, and he's indicated to me that he has an idea for what the movie should be, which is a great first step, because once he has the idea, then we can usually make it happen. And I think that his idea is that he wants the show to go and go and go, and he wants the movie to be the end. Yeah. So I don't know, when it's going to happen, but I do think it is going to happen. I hope he doesn't do it too soon, because we all really enjoy working there. But I would say there's going to be one probably, within the next 5 or so years, I would guess. Yeah.
You have written countless episodes for an animated show, and you also wrote the live-action sitcom Dads, and of course for the movies.
Right.
How different is it to write for live-action compared to animated?
Yeah, well, it's totally different, and I think it can be kind of a trap, because I think with the TV show Dads, I think we tried to write it like Family Guy, but it was live action, and that just doesn't work the same. Like, you need to, for live action, you need to take a breath. Like, you need to allow things to unfold a little bit more organically, whereas with Family Guy in particular, and animation in general, you can do things quick. Like, I have a 5-year-old daughter who is obsessed with SpongeBob, which I never watched because I'm too old. Like I never saw it. And now I'm watching it with her and it's very fast. And I really like it. Actually, I could totally see why kids love it. Like I myself think it's funny and it's very, very fast, and Family Guy is very fast. So with live action, you can't be that fast. It's too much of an assault on people's senses. Whereas I think people expect it in a cartoon because, again, of what, things like Bugs Bunny and The Simpsons had prepared everyone's brain. When they see a cartoon, they know it's going to be zany. They know it's going to be madcap, fast action.
I love that Family Guy is so fast. You never see someone fall. Like there's no animation between somebody standing and laying down. I always thought it was one of the funniest things ever. Just and they're there.
Yep. Yeah, that's definitely a conscious choice. I remember hearing about that at the inception of the show, that Seth felt like people didn't fall right in animation. They didn't fall in a funny enough way. And so oftentimes when you see people falling in Family Guy, the way they are on the ground, like sort of a weird pose, limbs all bent, like Seth was very particular about, like, I want them to look like that. I just don't want them to just like lie flat on their face. So I think that was pretty shrewd.
Do I have it correct that there's a lot of love for Giovanni Ribisi? Because I've seen him pop up in a lot of your productions.
Well, he's great. He's awesome. Yeah. He's, he's one of those guys where we were lucky to have him for anything, because he's a fantastic actor, in a way that, and that's not to diminish anyone else who's in any of our live action projects, because they're all like, listen, Mark Wahlberg is great. He's a movie star. There are plenty of people. Neil Patrick Harris is hilarious, but Giovanni Ribisi is on a different level. Like what he can deliver with his face and eyes, is just beyond.
That dance in front of the television, and it came back in a million ways to Die in the West, and it made me so happy.
Yes. Yeah. No, that was in particularly so creepy and just all him, And we did an episode of Dads. I don't know how we fooled him into being to starring in Dads, but we did. And there was an episode where he goes in to get a proctology exam, get a finger up his butt, basically. And the plot point was, the doctor was an old doctor, and he puts his finger in Giovanni's ass, and then the doctor dies with his finger up Giovanni's ass. And so it called for him, like it was just a close-up of Giovanni's face when it's happening, because we can't show it. And so he had to give the face of like shock and horror that something is in my butt. And then like even more shock and horror that this person's not moving, and then they're dead. And we asked him to hold this expression for a really long time, and he did. And when he did it for the show, he held this incredibly long expression that was so funny. And then at the end of it, a tear rolled down his face. And we were just like, I cannot believe what we are getting, like a sort of a Shakespearean level actor for this, having a finger in your ass.
Do you have a favorite character to write for? I know everyone writes for everything, but there must be some preference. Like a dumb character must be fun to write for. Totally.
So, I mean, Peter is the dumbest. So it's very fun to write for him, because he can, anything goes with his, his brain. But I also there's a character on the show, Principal Shepard. He's the principal of the high school.
Yes.
And it's played by that actor, Gary Cole, who is very funny. And he's great to write for, because he's got the voice of like this buttoned up white guy, but he's everything he does is just a misstep. Like he comes, it's like everything he plans on doing just somehow crumbles beneath his feet. So he's a fun character to write for.
Do you have a favorite episode? Can be one of yours, of course, but the whole run.
I think my favorite episode was the one where Brian and Stewie are trapped in the bank vault.
The bottle episode.
Yes. So that was written by one of our writers named Gary Giannetti. And we are, again, what Giovanni Ribisi is to acting, Gary Giannetti is to writing. So we're very lucky to have him on staff. He and he wrote a fantastic book, by the way, called "Do You Mind If I Cancel?" which is sort of about him growing up and being gay. And but his episodes. So the process I explained to you earlier about how we all kind of chop up and pitch and blah 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 blah, like that happens on every episode, except for that episode with the bank vault that came in just so perfect that I don't think a word of it was ever touched. Like, I don't think it ever changed. And that to me is impressive. And not only that, but it was legitimate because we couldn't have made that better. I think that, so I have to say that's probably my favorite episode.
I have to rewatch that one. It's been a while.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite joke or gag?
Yeah, there are gags that we as writers talk about in the room often. Like we'll refer to different lines that we thought were funny that kind of come up again and again. I would say my favorite gag is probably one that actually didn't make the show. It was cut. I think for sensitivity reasons. Like, it wasn't like that it wasn't funny enough. It was cut because we felt like maybe we can't do that. So there, I don't know how familiar you are with American football, but there was a player named Pat Tillman. Okay. And so he was a very good player on one of these teams, like a very gung-ho kind of white guy on one of the teams back in the 90s. And then when 9/11 happened, he quit football and joined the Army, and it was like big. Of course, the NFL was very excited about that. They're like, look at our hero and blah, blah, blah. So he went over to Iraq and sadly, he was killed. But then you sort of come to find out that not only was he killed, which sucks, but he was accidentally killed by his own guys. Like by our American guys. And so that we did a whole joke where Peter was, in a platoon in Iraq, and the sergeant is saying like, all right, men, like we got to go and we got to take that enemy's bunker. Do you understand me, Griffin? And Peter just keeps going, okay, so we go and we shoot Pat Tillman in the head, and then we take and the guy's like, no, we don't shoot Pat Tillman in the head. We take the enemy. Got it. Shoot Pat Tillman. Take the. And they're like, no. And so that joke was making us laugh so hard. But then ultimately, there was a big fight about it, and we ended up taking it out. The ironic thing was somehow Pat Tillman's brothers ended up seeing this bit, and they called in to Seth to tell them how much they loved it, which was so strange because I think what was happening at the time is, America can be the biggest asshole in the world most of the time. And so, of course, they're covering up that story about Pat Tillman, like, he may have been shot by his own guys. We don't think so. And it was probably Osama, So then when I think Pat Tillman's family was excited that somebody was finally telling the truth about what happened to him. But that to me stood out as like, that was a phenomenal it was almost like having Abbott and Costello do this incredibly dark routine about, fragging one of your own soldiers.
Is that still a thing there in America? Does the show still get slapped on the wrist a lot by FCC or something like that?
By the censors? Well, here's the thing. The big myth in the world of comedy and censorship is that the FCC has any power at all. They do not. There has never, and you can fact check this, there has never been one fine levied by the FCC that has held up. Never. Not the thing where Justin Timberlake pulled Janet Jackson's, covering off her boob. and they said, oh, we're fining CBS $1 million. They didn't have to pay it. They took it to court, and then the court threw it out. They're like, it's whatever they want to, it's freedom of expression. Like you can't tell them that they can't do something. So there's never been a fine that's held up against Family Guy. So what's the problem? The problem is these people who work in standards and practices at 20th or Fox Disney or whatever the company is called now, it's basically all up to them and the whims of their, feeling offended week to week. So they'll watch something and they'll say, you can't say in the ass, you can say on the ass, you can't say, like they'll tell you all these weird things you can't say. You can't say butthole, you could say poop hole, but it's all them just reacting and nothing is real. But we still have to, I don't know why, but we still have to do this dance with them where we change things and, hey, we don't want to change this. Can we change this one thing instead? And would you be okay if we didn't say vagina 4 times in this speech, we can say it twice? Is that better? And they're always like, oh, okay. So it's a whole dance, I assume, to keep the sort of 6 people employed, in the department. But I just, it's very frustrating to me that we have to go through it. And that's why, by the way, I'm what's called a showrunner now. So I'm theoretically responsible for talking to all these people and dealing with all these problems. But lucky as I am, and because Family Guy is such a big show, there are 2 showrunners. So the other showrunner on our show is this very talented writer named Rich Appel, who also happens to have been a district attorney in a former life. He was, so I'm just like, Rich, you talk to them. Like, I can't, you deal with them. So he does all that stuff. And I'm so thankful for it, because if I had to talk to them every week, I'm sure I would probably be fired,
Well, Alec, I'm so thankful to talk to you today. Thank you so much for doing this.
Xander, thank you so much. Anytime somebody European, that's very exciting for me. I usually have to talk to these American schnooks. And I love your background there. I love when dinosaurs ruled the earth, when that banner fell in Jurassic Park, that was one of the coolest moments.
It's my Star Wars. It's the movie that made me love movies.
I totally get it. I remember seeing it on opening night in New York City, and it was just an electric experience. It was a giant leap forward in movies.
And may I say, it felt really comfortable talking to you, because you do some voice work on the show also. So I'm sitting here listening to you thinking, I kind of know him, although I've never talked to you.
Right.
Do you get that a lot? People kind of recognizing your voice a little?
A little, yes, a little. And probably the one that's closest to what I'm doing is I do the voice of Jesus on the show. So whenever you see Jesus, and I just do my own voice. So it pretty much sounds like this. Yeah.
Well, this did feel a little like a religious experience to me.
Yes.
Thanks again, Alec. An absolute honor.
Oh, thank you, Xander. I really appreciate it.
Dit was Ben je nog aan het kijken voor deze week. Voor de geïnteresseerden, Family Guy is nog steeds te vinden op Disney Plus en Netflix. That 1 en 2 staan op Netflix en A Million Ways to Die in the West staat op Amazon Prime. Ik dank jullie voor het luisteren. Aarzel niet om iets te droppen op Facebook, Instagram, Twitter of onze Discord als je genoten hebt en de show wilt delen met uw volgers. Ik was Xander de Rijke. Jullie horen mij volgende week weer terug en dan bingen we weer iets anders in Ben je nog aan het kijken.
Met Xander de Rijke.